Okay, welcome everybody for the regular Board of Finance, January 9th meeting. Please join me for the pledge. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we don't have a lot on the agenda. We know we have Bobby, we have Dee, and we have Bobby Joe on Zoom tonight. And Will tested positive for COVID today.
Oh.
Yeah, so
Indoor knobs.
with that, yeah,
Indoor knobs.
yep, exactly. You can't lick doorknobs anymore. No.
Nope,
Any-
so.
again, first thing on agenda, any public input? I know we have John and Paula for something else on the agenda, but correspondence, anything correspondence?
No.
Nothing, and no one in the public there, so, okay. Next thing is consideration for the December 12th meeting. I think everybody was there for that. You have the minutes,
Have motion to accept minutes.
and we have a motion, and do we have a second on the minutes for December 12th?
The second that's something.
Okay, so we have a motion, and a second. Does anybody have any comments on the minutes? You guys raise your hands. I see you're all on mute, but you're all good. Okay, so try everybody's minds. All in favor on the minutes for December 12th? Please, aye. Okay, sure, unanimous. All right, Paul and John, you're up. Consideration for the elderly program, the relief tax program.
Yeah. All circulated as part of the minutes or part of the materials. This sheet that we get from the state every year, giving the new brackets. And as you're aware, we've had 2 years of fairly high inflation. So as a result, the increases in the brackets that the state publishes and we follow as a town have increased this year. In raw terms, last year, the highest bracket or the most income bracket was 49.1. And that's going to 53.4 this year. So it's reflective of the increases that we're seeing in inflation. I apologize, she don't want to refer to, and I'll try to make it up for those that didn't get it as part of the packet, those calls. Just a brief summary of what happened last year with the program. And I guess it was a kind of a ho-hum year. Nothing much changed, except the cost of the program went up, not surprisingly, because of the revow for the town. And the tax benefit program was a result of giving them a reduction in their property taxes. So with the increase in real estate values, the program costs went up. But the number of people applying, which kind of came as a surprise to me, was not that different than it was the previous years. This past year, 2002 calendar year, we had 205 that were qualified for the program. The year before, we had 207. So not a dramatic change. We had, of those 205 that qualified, we had 186 were people who had applied previously, and we had 19 new applicants. The percentages by bracket, again, remain relatively constant. I'm expecting that this year, as a result of two things. One, in the inflation impact as we see in the new brackets, we're going to see more people applying this year. And the second piece is, I always, if somebody calls and said, hey, I've heard about this program, I have interest, how can I get information? I add them to a mailing list. In previous years, and I've done this for a while now, if you had 10 or 12 people that you added to the list, that was a fairly representative this year. This year, I'm already up to over 60 people that have called and asked to be added. Some of those I know going in, just talking to them on the phone, aren't going to qualify because their income, even with a higher threshold, are not going to be able to qualify. I think the good news is if you look at those on the sheet, the number of applicants at that 75% tax reduction bracket, and I view those as the people that really can benefit from the town program the most, because they probably would not be able to stay in their homes with income levels as low as they were. The income range last year for being in that bracket was a maximum of 20,200. We had 37 people in that bracket that qualified. versus the previous year, which was 36. So I think it's a good sign that we are getting to the people that are probably most in need of the program. But other than that, we brought the numbers in so you'd be aware of what we're going to be working with this year. Again, we're following, as we did last year, the state program in brackets. And as I said, I suspect as people react to the higher real estate taxes and those that have already indicated that they want to hear about the program at least, we can probably expect that it's going to be a much busier year this year than it was last year. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer.
Guys on Zoom, does anybody have any questions for Paul or John? No, we're good. Yes. So, John, thank you for being here, and thank you for doing what you do for the seniors. It's great that we went from 49.1 to 53 something for their income bracket. I always hear on the street that I don't qualify. Was there any consideration for the percentage of tax relief in any of those brackets? Or was it just the state deciding because of inflation that they
The
just wanted?
state provides the brackets which we follow, the income brackets.
No, I know,
we follow.
but was there any talk and maybe raising the percentage of tax relief in this
That would
program?
require action on the board of public hearings and all that sort of thing. So
At the state level?
No, for us here in the town. The town does not dictate the percent relief that we give. That's determined by Bethel. The state determines the income brackets. But the income brackets have been the same income brackets since 2005 in terms of percentage reduction.
So maybe Brad, maybe you could help me. I always felt like there was nothing more we could do as a board of finance to help seniors stay in their homes in the town of Bethel. So moving forward, what are the tools that we have to be able to make it affordable?
Well, this is
more
just
affordable?
one of the options, right? Because there's veterans assistance. What are the other programs that the town runs?
The programs that we have in town available are the homeowners program, which is the one we're discussing tonight. Veterans program, which gets you a reduction in the assessed value of your house. So it's not a direct tax benefit, but a reduction in the assessed value. And then I also administer programs for renters in town and energy assistance. So those are the primary programs. We have a couple other programs that are relatively small. People who are disabled can qualify for a small reduction in their taxes, people that are blind. But those are basically the programs. And the three that directly affect the real estate taxes are homeowners program, the veterans program, and the combination disabled and blind.
Can a veteran qualify for both the
Yes.
veterans and the
Yes.
senior? Okay.
Two
Senior.
separate programs.
And what is the max a veteran could receive through that program?
If they're a homeowner, and the majority are, they can get up to a 10% reduction in the assessed value of their house.
Of the assessed value?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's the portion that Bethel does. The portion that the state does is very small, relatively speaking. You can get $1,000 plus 500 off the assessed value, so it's about a $45 benefit.
It's not gonna change it.
And if you're qualified for the state level, which is lower than this level, you can qualify to double that number, so it can go from 1,500 to 3,000. But the big benefit for the veteran is that they qualify for the Bethel benefit.
So I guess, Mr. Chairman, I guess where my question comes from, with Stony Hill, homeowners age rising every year, I think it's really important for us as a board to try to make it more feasible for the elderly to stay in their home. We all know it's $17,000 to raise one child, and I just see these houses selling in Stony Hill and with empty nesters creating two children in the school system, and then it's a losing proposition for the town. So whatever we could do to try to, to lessen the impact would be great.
So would one of those avenues be a public hearing and a town
Well, I
meeting,
think,
special town meeting?
I know we talked about this last year, and I'm sorry I wasn't on it, but I know Bob was on it, John, you were on it.
Mhm.
There's a committee that looked at this program,
Right.
did a whole deep dive of it, and then I believe COVID happened, right?
It was right before COVID.
Yeah.
Right before COVID, and it was never acted on. So it is something we should take back to the first selectman to look at what ways we could change it,
Yeah.
because I know there were some suggestions that came out of that weren't acted on, correct?
Correct. Quite honestly, they were more for limiting people who felt not to deserve to be in the program as they ordered to increase the benefits, but. that
Correct,
was the
but if
thing.
you put caps on people that were sitting on, there's right now no cap. If you have $1 million in your 401k. But you're not drawing on it, you don't have to draw on it, and your
But that's
income's
still an
going up.
asset, so you're not qualifying for the program.
Because it's not income, it's
But they
withdrawals.
changed that. You used to be able to have that, right?
So,
No, those changes were never put in place.
correct.
They were recommended, but they were never put in place.
The changes to make it
Qualifications, yeah.
that you shouldn't have $1 million. You can't have $1 million.
Correct, so that, right now, as
That's
the
what I'm
program
saying.
sits, that restriction does not apply.
Right.
So that
and it
person
should.
still qualifies. So, but if we take where they left off and continue forward and put some of these restrictions in, and you disqualify some people that don't need it, it does then free up more money to look at changing the program to help more people that do actually need it. Yeah.
That's important. I think that restriction is really important.
So that was a committee the Board of Selectmen set up, and Bob, I believe you were on it, weren't you?
I was, and I think I may have joked with you about this before, Nick. I had just joined the Board of Finance, and the chair
you
at the
got-
time, exactly.
You weren't there, and you got your name put in, I get you.
I think that's right. And it was, but look, it was a fantastic experience. John and the team do a fantastic job with this program. And to John Lennon's point, right, we all want to do what we can to keep seniors in their home, keep them in Bethel. It adds to, right, the rich fabric of our town. And I think what we found back then was our program is actually very generous. It was one of the most, if not most generous from the surrounding towns. Though we did have some suggestions, I think as Brad is mentioning, that was presented to the First Select and the Board of Selectmen for further discussion. So yeah, maybe it is time to kind of pick that up again, to Cynthia's point, to kind of revisit it and see if there's ways of, again, further improving it. To John Sarver's point, I think many of the suggestions were to qualification, right? I think we were wondering if somebody had $1 million in assets that doesn't count as income, how do you feel about whether that impacts qualification or not? But those are the kinds of very difficult questions to face into that probably make some sense to face into again. And then again, see if we can keep this program to be one of the better ones in the area.
So I think we'll talk with the First Selectman and see if we can reignite it, just to look at it.
Yeah.
It doesn't cost anything to look at it.
Yeah, and just like the same thing happened with the charter revision, right? Like we got to pick that back up again. And I don't think they need to start anew.
No, not at all.
If
No,
Just pick up
Bob
where
is
they left
still
off.
interested, John's here.
I don't-
I'll make a
Paul
motion
and I
and then
forget
Frida's
about-
on it again, right?
Do
But
we need to make a recommendation to put
Should
Bob
I-
back on the committee?
Move up.
I don't think we're there yet. I think we should just talk to Dan
We'll
about
talk
it.
to
okay.
Dan, right.
Yeah.
All right,
Um,
Something he has to say.
offline.
But even, I think Bob Kozlowski was on it, and Skako was on it. And I think we pick up where we left off with some of that.
Okay.
They're still around, let's put them to work.
So the ask tonight is not a dollar amount.
No, I
It's
think
just
not.
to adopt.
No, just to.
Just to approve what they
Right,
put forward.
exactly.
Yeah.
Correct.
So
Just to
does
make
somebody
it
want to
clear
make a
what
motion
The state has published way of packets.
with the rate?
Could I make one,
Sure.
pitch, and I apologize for taking the
No,
time.
no, no.
There's a word that gets bandied around every once in a while, and it sounds very attractive. Some people have memories that go back a long way, and the state at one point had something called a freeze program. I'm not positive which towns have a version of that, because the old program, the state said, we will fund this program forever, and 2 years later, they said, and this is way back in history. They said it's, some towns have instituted a freeze program. And that is when you reach a certain age, your taxes get frozen. Part and parcel of that decision is, at least the way most structure it, is that the unpaid tax portion becomes a lien against the property. But I was quite surprised because there was some discussion in the town, a number of years ago. And the folks that were in the home thought this is terrific, a freeze program, our taxes won't go up.
They didn't understand.
No.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a reverse
The
mortgage.
kids, for the most part, were the ones that said, don't ever implement that program because, you know, we'll have the tax
Taking that-
liability.
If dad's going on vacation, I pay later.
Yeah, right?
So you might hear the word freeze, and I think that's a loaded question, but there are a couple towns that do.
It's just
have
being
freeze
put back on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, I feel much better because I don't remember that, so I'm not that old.
yeah. That had to be way back.
Yeah, that was way back. Well, thank you.
Thank you, John.
State of Connecticut Office of Policy Management talked about that program, that said, no new applicants have been allowed since the 1978 program. So it goes back a while. You got that corporate memory. At least that's the state's program. I'm sure towns have their own.
John, did you want to make a motion?
Yeah, so I'd like to make a motion that we approve the tax relief for the elderly program as presented tonight.
Second,
We have a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? You guys all good there? Shaking your head, Dee? All right, I'll try everybody's mind. All in favor?
aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you for coming out again. folks.
Okay.
All right, all right.
Thank you.
Stay dry, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. everyone. All right, moving right along, we did have, the Park and Rec, as you know, we've been working on it for a few months. They're running over budget on a few things. Unfortunately, the Board of Finance cannot make a town meeting. It needs to go to the Board of Selectmen and then to us. But there was just a misstep there, but Brad's gonna kind of give us an update where we're at. And unfortunately, we're gonna have a special meeting probably next week. It'll be a 10-minute meeting. But Brad, can you just kind of tell us where we're at?
So in November, when Park and Rec came, they had looked at their salary line and program lines. And their estimate at that time was they were gonna be $285,000 short. That number is still holding true 2 months later. At that meeting, rightfully so, it was pointed out, why are you only coming us with 2 of your accounts? Look at everything and get back to us. So Rachel and the commission has done that. One of the the only other account that they're looking for an adjustment on is their maintenance and supplies account. The budget was 136,100. They're asking for an adjustment of $34,000 on that to make it 170,100. Rachel and I were digging through the history of this account. The 5-year average on it, or 6-year average of it, is 157. So why it was ever budgeted at 136 makes 0 sense. And it's just, some of it is, I think some of the budgeting in the past was, I'm just gonna put everything up 3%. And they just took the prior year number and went up 3%. But as we've seen, you can't really play that game anymore because some things are up 20%, some things are up 5%. You really have to delve into all the numbers of it. And that's what Rachel's done. When we can do this officially, Rachel and the commission will be here to answer questions on it. So I'm just giving you the kind of Cliff Notes version of it. Like, one of the things that Park and Rec pays from this account is porta potties. And the cost of porta potties have gone through the roof. And there's a lot of them throughout all the parks. There's the school complex has some by the track, even though there's bathrooms, but sometimes it's bringing porta potties because the track bathroom gets shut down because somebody flushed something in it they shouldn't. And suddenly now you gotta bring in porta potties for 2 weeks.
What, wasn't there some discussion about the Board of Ed paying for specific things that pertaining to their activities, like
Yeah.
portalets?
So that's always been a struggle of who's supposed to pay for some of this stuff. The track bathroom is a good example. In this fiscal year, somebody flushed underwear in that toilet, broke the motor, got to replace the motor's like $8,000 or whatever, $5,000, whatever it is. Board of Ed said, we'll split it with you, because it was probably somebody at one of their events. And afterwards, after they agreed to it, they go, I don't know why we agreed to that. It's such a fine line of what's a Board of Ed expense, what's a town expense,
Well,
and it is a struggle, and there is no good answer, really.
it just seems really black and white to me that if a Park and Rec is benefiting from a program and it's getting revenue for them, they provide the porta potties. If it's the school that has an event in the track, whatever, and they're
Yeah.
in getting revenue from it, they should provide.
Yeah, what's hard with some of the things that like, if you're talking about a specific event, I don't know if that happens, but that's easier to separate out, right? But if you're talking about like a maintenance item, like the bathroom gets trashed. Do we know if it happened by somebody that, a townsperson that was walking at night that used the bathroom, or do we know if it was because of the high school football game?
Well, don't you think you have to take it as kind of an assumed thing? I mean, it's, you know, it's pretty easy to.
It's a mix. I mean, on Tuesday, it may be a
understand what
park
you're
and rec
saying.
issue, and
Yeah, I
then
understand.
Wednesday it might be a board of ed, you know what I mean? So.
Well,
Is that bad?
Yeah.
Well, you can't, well, you're saying
If
break
the
it up
porta
that way.
potties were put in on a Monday and they're serviced all week long.
Right.
It's hard to break it down and say, oh geez, you had 3 baseball games versus 1 park and rec. event."
Okay, I see
Yeah.
what you're saying.
That's what I mean.
I
You
think-
can't ask them to bring another porta potty.
Now, you
3
can do
times a month.
percentage of
They're using the
monthly
same.
budget.
I think what some of my focus when we've been meeting with the department heads during like the meetings with Dan and I and Sebi is. Instead of necessarily having the fight of what department's supposed to pay for it, the fight really should be at tracking.
Should be
If-
what, I'm sorry?
Yeah.
At tracking,
Tracking
like,
the.
even if, instead of fighting with the Board of Ed on everything of how much, what percentage of this is yours, what is. Figure out like porta potties for the school complex,
Right,
break that out. Here's porta potties for. Tower's a bad example, because, but,
like for
like,
the year.
you know, like, and I think some of that stuff we have to dig into more. When Bob Kozlowski was the comptroller, he started a spreadsheet that we update every year as part of the budget process. How much school expenses are in the town budget?
Mhm.
And not picking on the school, I think it's just important to track. So I think some of that we have to look at. Like, we were having a similar fight with tree work. Should tree work that's in a park get charged to Park and Rec, or we have a tree warrant account? And I think tracking wise, it almost makes sense to track all tree work out of one account. And go like, if you wanna, Eric, that's one of your budgets, if you wanna track how much of that tree work was in parks and how much was for road. Great, but why are we fighting about, oh no, that's your bill, that's my bill?
I thought that was cleared up because I remember a very in-depth conversation about what twiglets were and trees and branches as opposed to giant trees. That the
Yeah,
tree
but
warden would take. care
You
of.
get new directors of public works that have different opinions and they code things differently, and then you have to clean them up.
Mhm.
And currently, what part of a particular budget is set aside for trees to then transfer to a tree warden account? How do you figure that number out?
Yeah.
You know, it just would
Yeah,
be,
I think it's just so much easier if it's tree work, let's charge it to the tree warden account. So we're not squabbling over
But then track it, right?
that trees along the road, but it's in McCower, you know, like.
no, I know, but
Yeah.
what dollar amount you pull out of the park and rec account now to fund
Yeah.
the tree warden to not create a new line?
Yeah, so in
It's tough
twenty
to start it.
twenty-three, Park and Rec budget had a line, $10,000 for tree work. And they got charged $30,000, but they have no control over it. The second the tree warden looks at a tree and
gotta
says it
come down.
needs to come down. You better take the thing down, because if
Right,
it
before-
falls on
Yeah.
somebody, you're gonna get sued anyway, but
Knowing
now
about it,
you're.
right.
Super
Now you're on
liable,
notice, right.
yeah. So it's one of those. Some of it too, John, is. If it's in the tree warrant account, and in the tree warrant account, we're only taking down trees that need to come down, and if that account is trending up. The boards can look at it and go, I understand why, we had to take down extra tree,
Mhm.
when it's, some of it's buried in Park and Rec.
Right,
Park
There's
and
no way to
Rec's-
put a finger on it, yeah.
Yeah, and then you have to delve into it and go, oh, that's 20,000 of that was tree work, we only budgeted 10. But there's a lot of those things that we're trying to clean up now with Dan, and that's what's been really helpful about like the quarterly budget reviews with the department heads of like. What is this $3,000
You're
expense?
seeing it real time, yeah. yeah.
You know, cause we're delving into those things.
because the tree warden's account only has, was it 10,000? I mean, I
It's like
remember. we kept looking.
170,000.
Yeah.
No,
I-
just over
it's a
100.
lot.
Okay, was that much?
But not nearly enough, really, I mean.
It depends on the year though, 'cause
Yeah.
I think. I can tell you,
Well. It's hard to say.
yeah, but you know, we're, as we sit here prepping for,
The 2.5, Bob, you don't have a water problem, do you? You're good tonight?
So far, yeah.
Try,
The lights are still on, so.
All right, but you know, and. If we could talk about the fix, I think as a group, we talked about it's important for the services that Park and Rec does for the community. But Brad has come up with some numbers, so we can just talk about that, Brad, a little bit, the
Yeah.
revenue and then
So looking at the $319,000 adjustment to expenses. So if the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance approve that and the townspeople approve it, what's the other part that we're taking? So your options would be fund balance or adjusting your budget, really. Looking at what the revenue projections are halfway through the year, I think the best route is leave our fund balance alone. We don't know what's gonna happen with the Board of Ed HVAC. So then when I looked at the revenue accounts, two accounts made the most sense for me. So right now, the Park and Rec program account, which is their revenue account, the budget is $750,000. Last year, they brought in, I didn't like roll it, like 860, 857, I think. And so far this year, let me give you actual numbers. So, sorry, last year they brought in 847, 540. So far through the 6 months of the year, they're at 401. But April and May are their biggest collection months. Last April, they brought in $200,000. It's once they start doing all the summer programs. So, but if you just look at the first 6 months of the year, they've collected almost $93,000 more than they did the first 6 months of the prior year. So all I did, I looked at the 847.5 they brought in last year. I added 90,000, well, the 92,878, and you get the $940,000. So I think that's a conservative estimate of what Park and Rec revenue is gonna bring in for 2024. So when we compare the 940 that they're projected to hit, versus the 750 we budgeted, it's $190,000 difference. So if the boards feel it's appropriate to make this change, the 319 expenses, to offset it, 190, we bump up Park and Rec projected revenue. We go from 750 to 940. That leaves another $129,000 we have to adjust for. We had a couple options. I've talked a lot about the income we've got from the state is projected to be $1 million more than what we budgeted for. Those are kind of one-time things. So if we bump that up $129,000 for the 25 revenue projection, we might be bumping it right back down.
What is that $1 million for? Or
So we got a municipal revenue sharing grant that the state every year says they're gonna give it to us. And they finally actually one year
and
did.
actually did it?
so we
Um,
could say that.
And the motor vehicle, when the state said the motor vehicle at 3246. I did not budget for that. One, didn't trust that we were gonna get it. The town of Bethel has set our car mill rate at 32 for like 7-8 years. So if they looked at it and said, oh, we're not sending you this $500,000, we would add a $500,000 hole in the budget. Because we didn't budget for it and did get it. That's gonna be when we close out fiscal year 24, that's $500,000 if the board wants to put in the tax stabilization and give
Sure.
right back to the people.
Yeah,
that
yeah,
way.
yeah.
You know, like,
Mhm.
So one of the other accounts I look is interest. So earned interest from our bank accounts, our holdings, we have a healthy fund balance. We budgeted $450,000 in interest income. Through December 31st, we're at $660,000. As most people know, interest rates are really high right now. Really high compared to where they were previously. Compared, if you're 50 years old and you bought a house 30 years ago, you might have been thrilled to get, or maybe, I don't know the timing of it, before I bought a house. But a lot of people talk about that are 56 years old, talk about their first mortgage was 18, 13, whatever. They would have jumped that 5%.
Well, it was 7.5 when I bought mine in 1996.
Yeah,
So,
so,
and of course I refinanced.
so it's not necessarily crazy high historically. It's crazy high in the short term. So
Compared
to move from the $450,000 we have in projected or budgeted interest. If we move that up to 129,000 to 579, one, we're guaranteed to hit it because we already did. And two, when I build out the projections for revenue for 2025. More than likely that 450 is gonna go over that 579 number anyway. So we're not creating a revenue hole in the future.
Okay.
And that was important to me because I didn't want something the boards do today. To be
Affect
something we
next.
have to fix in April, March and April. So especially with such a short turnaround, like, we shouldn't be making holes for ourselves. If we were gonna do that, we should just then use fund balance, but I don't think we need to. So obviously, because the board can't do anything until the Board of Selectmen do it from based on the charter. Board doesn't need to do anything tonight, but it's on the agenda as an update. So that's where we're at. Obviously, any questions I'll gladly answer, and you'll have another opportunity when Park and Rec officially comes
Yeah.
to do it.
I'm fine.
Bob, did you have anything to add to that? Or I think everybody knows what's going on, but you have any comment?
Yeah, nothing to add. This makes perfect sense. Thanks, Brad. Thanks, Nick. I think this is the right way to go forward.
Thank you. Okay, so again, we're not gonna make a motion,
Anybody else?
but Dee and Bobby, you're all good? Okay. So we're not gonna make a motion tonight, but it was just I wanted everybody to be comfortable where we're going. We're fixing it. We didn't create the problem. Brad, this can't happen again, obviously,
Correct.
and I think Rachel is very clear with that.
Yeah, so we talked a lot about it. Rachel inherited this budget. She's gotten a very deep dive in budgeting and tracking
It's
expenses.
a big lesson.
She was disappointed when she found out you guys couldn't act on it tonight, because she feels like it's as much.
She just wants it over.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so, but let's do it right.
Right,
So,
exactly. So again, we can't set a town meeting for this, so we need to let the Board of Selectmen, they're gonna put it on Tuesday's agenda, and then we'll have a special real quick to get it over with,
yeah,
so. Okay, all right, so that's it on that update. We have Brad's report.
all right, revenue, obviously, we just talked a lot about revenue. We've already collected again, $100 million from miscellaneous state revenue and the intergovernmental revenues. The 282,660 that we budgeted for comes in May. So that account will be fully over $1 million. Pilot's already over, college and hospitals comes once a year. I don't know, I think that's towards the end of the year thing. We talked last month about the Kerma revenue sharing, which was budgeted for 60,000. It's the only zero in charges for services. It's gonna be a zero all year. Kerma had a bad year because of a fire at a high school in a neighboring town. So they didn't do any revenue sharing this year. Use of money, interest, we're already at 660, which we talked about. Property leases is at 55%. You would expect it to be right around there. The two items below it, change in future value. That's new for what we started doing in 2023 based on conversations with the auditors. It's just change in the value of one of our investment accounts that we have. So that book that is a revenue item is $319,000 that we didn't budget for at all. There shouldn't be any opportunity for a drop right now because of what the market's doing, but there have been other years that there have been. We could dive into that more on another time, because I have to pull some of the history for the board, but there were times that the drop was lower. And it was part of the audit reports, but not on the reporting that came to the Board of Finance. I added it to the sheet for this month because I think it's important that we start looking at it. The other item that's on here is sale of properties. Obviously, that's the sale of 2 of the 4 properties. The third one we haven't been paid for yet, and the fourth one hasn't been sold. As we know, at some point, we have to figure out what we're doing with the EDC debt. And the board wants to give the EDC some money for the post board. Just looking at the rest of the revenue, licenses and permits, we're already at 100%. Charges for services, the next group is at 51. Vendor licenses is very small. LoSiP, we have no plans to draw on LoSiP at this time. The last time we used LoSiP is when they did $750,000 worth of extra road work. So that might be a zero all year, but we don't need it at this time, so unless there's a project that we want to do at some point with it, it might remain a zero. Everything else is good. General tax revenues at 60%. Paul is frustrated because her collection rate's a little lower because the current year she's at 59, the prior year she was at 62 through December.
That's almost 3%. I mean,
It's also, there's some timing issues in there. How many people came in January 2nd this year to pay versus that paid in December last year? Some of it is how much, there's only so much prior year you can collect at some point. If you collect a very high percentage every year, at some point your prior year is gonna go down. It's always kind of bugged me, but there's years that she went over 100% and you go, how do you collect more than 100%?
has to.
You collect the priors and you get penalties and interest. You know, but if you look at the prior year, we budgeted 550, we're at 65% of it at 359. Everything there is looking good. We're not, the percentage is a little scary, but when you look at the actual dollars of where we're at, we're in a pretty good spot. Expense wise, the probate's the only zero. It's always a zero until we bill Reading, Ridgefield, and Newtown. Well, once we get past like 2 months of the year. So we bill them at the end of the year. Employee benefits, which is a big account, we're at less than 50%. Park and Rec, obviously, we talked a lot about that, so that percentage wise doesn't look great when you go through the detail, but we're working on that. Everything else is in a pretty good spot. December's a pretty good chance to look at what's in the left-hand column versus the right-hand column when you look at year-to-date expanded versus unexpended. Finance looks high, but some of that is the audit. We get most of our audit bills the first 6 months of the year. So yeah, I think overall, we're in pretty good space. Police department gets a little messy because you get whenever they buy their capital items. The other thing with the police department, one of the big salary expenditures every year is contractually, they get holiday pay, which is paid out in end of November, early December. So obviously that's been paid out, but that's a one-time a year payment.
So they get their 13 paid holidays and just one check like that?
One, yeah. Probably a very exciting week to be a police officer when you get that one check. But yeah, overall, everything's in pretty good shape. One of the accounts that went over last year was fleet. Right now, they look okay, but fleet's gonna depend on how rough of a winter we have, how much those big plow trucks hold up. They went through a lot of outside repair work last year on some of those big plow trucks because they're older. And even though the boards had approved buying one, we couldn't get them in. So
But isn't it at this point, because we've got some new trucks in the fleet, that number should start working on the better
it
side?
should start coming in, but I don't know.
But
if
they
it's
don't
gotten those
actually
trucks in.
have
They don't
any of the
them in.
big ones yet.
They got two delivered, didn't they, with the bodies and everything?
I think it was 2 months ago that the body amount was approved.
Oh,
They're not
Yeah.
here in a.
They're not in yet,
We're in a
because
separate
when we
one.
did that tour,
I think he said March.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think he
February.
was hoping towards the end of January, but you don't know, like, but the two of those, I think, are at the bodybuilder.
The cabin chassis we have, they've been delivered, but they're
Bodybuilder.
building and plumbing.
So,
is
But-
it premature to think that maybe the highway and the public works budgets are gonna have some surplus because of the winter that we're having, knock on wood, or it's just too early to
It's
start
too
having those
early.
30
yeah,
day meetings? Yeah.
it's too early, like right now, like when we were there for the walkthrough, the sand shed was full. So, but tomorrow morning, they might go through a lot of sand,
Yeah, three sandings, so they'll be back to.
you know?
I think
so
we need to be more positive than
Yeah,
Yeah.
stop being so negative, Nancy here.
that.
It's hard, when you work in finance, it's hard not to, you know, be concerned about the negative. Can we go back to the revenue, that's on positive, the revenue.
I wanna go back and I can't figure out why someone would flush their underwear down the toilet.
They had an accident apparently. They weren't
That's-
bringing those home.
I'm thinking about
You
that.
know what, that's a conversation for you and Rachel.
Yeah. exactly.
You know,
Um,
Does anybody on Zoom have anything for Brad? You're all good? Okay. All right, anything, John?
After you vote on that, I have two other updates for you, but I think let's handle the comptroller report.
Bob, would you like to make a motion for Brad's? I mean, I'm trying to lay off his report here, so if you want to jump in.
Sure, I'd like to make a motion that we accept the comptroller's report as submitted.
I'll
And
second
and
that.
Bob, well, Bobby Joe just seconded. I
Okay,
saw
okay.
her. I saw her. She
She
blinked
was
her eyes.
signaling.
Right,
Okay.
exactly. So we have a motion for the approval of Brad's report. All in favor? Aye, say aye.
Two other updates, the audit is not complete yet, they are working on it, I just, before this meeting, sent them stuff that they requested from us that they're trying to finish up. He's supposed to get me a draft of, there's a big comprehensive annual report, and then there's a single, they call it the single state, which is a smaller one that's all about like the federal and state money comes in, they're supposed to send me a draft of the smaller one soon. We're getting close. I know they're going back and forth, the last week of December. That they had to refile something with the state on the Board of Ed side, so some time was spent on that. We talked a lot about it, it's frustrating. I want it done, we're making our push, we're getting there. Unfortunately, it's not done though, but I will keep this board updated on what's going on. I hope if we do a special after that meeting, I'll tell you, because it won't be on the agenda, but I'll tell you that we're getting there. Where it's done, that we have a draft of it. The other update is, I believe, February.
I think it's gonna be February first.
So, February first, the town is no longer going to be paying Zoom anymore for our meetings. We still will have a virtual option. It'll just be through Google Meet. The town has Google for our email, so we have the business account. When we went with Zoom initially, Zoom was the premier use for these kind of things. Since then, all the other ones that offer one have really beefed them up. The Google Meet is comparable at this point. And the biggest difference is we don't pay anything additional for using Google Meet. We could have just as big of meetings, we can do recordings, all that. And as I told somebody earlier today, the chief finance director doesn't want to pay Zoom $3,000 anymore a year. So that we can have meetings with Zoom when we have one that we already paid for.
I thought it would have been more, but
Yeah. So, well, the big account that we do this meeting on and the Board of Selectmen on, the bill's like $250 a month. Park and Rec had a separate one at one point. We canceled that 2 months ago. So we've been dwindling some of these down. Cause obviously when COVID hit and everybody scrambled,
Yeah,
you got up and running the best you could. And now we're really delving into like, what do we still really need to carry? Speaking to IT about it before we announced anything and talking to Dan. Our intent was, let's get off Zoom, we'll go to Google Meet. If it really isn't doing what we needed to, we could always go back, but. You know, $3,000 on an $89 million budget isn't a lot of money, but why spend $3,000 that we don't have to?
so it's just another app and on our minutes to have the
Yeah,
the
it'll
Zoom
just be
thing.
a different-
So it's just not, it's just another app.
is
everybody
it
does.
part of the, your Google Business package, and is it free within that?
Yeah,
Okay,
we're not
that's-
paying anything addition, it's
Right.
included in it, so.
That's what I want to know.
And one of the things early on why we didn't switch to it, they used to cap how many people could be in. And one of the
Zoom
big reasons
capped
we went with Zoom though, and we pay $250 a month. Is to get the one that you can have over 100
Yeah.
people and over 45 minutes, whatever.
Yeah,
Which we haven't had a big meeting like that, but we didn't want to take it away.
right.
Something happened and we need to do a public hearing. You know, we had some large public hearings.
Well, I mean, early on in the Board of Finance, we had over a couple hundred people on it.
Yeah,
And, you know, there was some talk about getting rid of hybrid meetings. I think that's a mistake, right?
Yeah.
I think people need to have the option, especially if they're traveling or something.
Yeah.
You know, more information is better, I think.
well, just and. I don't know a single family right now that hasn't dealt with somebody being sick over the last couple weeks.
Sure.
To be able to still participate.
It's
And be at
important.
home and be safe is, I think, important.
Well, it's
Um,
very important, I think.
The nice thing would be is if we ever get some of the public more involved, because they could just do it, but that's what the recordings are for too.
Mhm.
You know, at a public meeting where the only opportunity really is to speak at the front of it. Maybe your opportunity really is to take advantage of the recording, so you're in the know.
I think live is, there's no substitute to it.
Yeah.
You know, so,
So.
Okay.
But those are my updates.
okay.
Okay, that's something.
Yes, ma'am.
So with the Zoom, we have the same number every,
Mhm.
for every agenda, but it's gonna be different for each Google Meet, so you just click on it. Don't try to duplicate the number for each meeting.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
The current agenda will have the new set of numbers. and you
Correct.
Click
Yeah.
on it in blue.
It'll be linked, yeah,
I got you.
got it.
Okay. All right, that seems like an easy, especially for a guy like me.
Yeah, well,
It's really easy if you just show up.
Right,
You
exactly.
don't have to-
Well, no, I'm in person guy, right, exactly. I have COVID right now. All right, does anybody have anything? I would accept the motion. Someone want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Excellent. Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for being on Zoom. All right, thanks, Steve.